Thank you all for being here. We've got time scheduled from 9 to noon today, so we'll try to be as respectful as we can for the obligations that everyone has this time of year. Certainly, I know we're all busy, but thank you all for being here. I'm Nick Marks. I'm co-chairing the UNH site visit along with Laura Westlowski. And I just wanted to sort of orient everyone to what we're going to cover today, what's in your packet, and then we'll dive right in and get started. Anytime, if you have questions that come up, we don't have to save those to the end. We can sort of interject those as needed. And again, we'll be sharing this out with anyone who's not able to be with us today, any of the reviewers. And Laura and I will be following up directly as well. So again, thank you all for being here. So you should all have a packet that includes 4 things. You've got the agenda on the top. Second section of the packet is PowerPoint that we'll be covering today. The PowerPoint essentially covers review expectations and what we're expecting of you as reviewers. The third piece of the packet is the professional education requirements reviewer assessment worksheet. This is the professional ed standards. I just emailed about 5 minutes ago all of the certification specific standards in that review worksheet as well, so you'll have that in your email. The last thing in the packet is the report template, which we'll be covering today. And you should all also have a copy of a sheet that will allow you to get access to the Wi-Fi while we're here. We've had good luck so far, so fingers crossed that that'll continue to be the case. So I thought it would be good to start with introductions, just to go around the table so we all know one another. Along with that, I have a contact information collection sheet that I'll circulate. I've already included Laura's information, my information, but what we're really trying to capture is your preferred email address, your preferred phone contact, cell phone ideally if you have one. And also we want to make sure that we identify anyone who has any specific accommodations, food allergies, things of that nature, so that we can make sure that we stay on top of that just for the sake of the site visit that's coming up in October. So I'll start circulating to the right here, and then maybe we'll just go around to the left, and that way at some point we'll, someone will be trying to write their contact information while we're trying to introduce themselves. Laura?
I'm Laura Westlowski. I'm the Director of Teacher Education Programs at St. Anselm College, and I am on the board, the Council for Teacher Education.
I'm Ann Parsons. I'm the Associate Director for School Leadership at Upper Valley Educator Institute.
I'm Tom Trim from UNH. I just stepped down as Director of Ed Prep, but I'm sort of continuing to support this process in that role through this visit.
I'm Liz Archeri. I'm also from UNH, and I'm the coordinator of accreditation and certification.
I'm Shannon Douglas, also from UNH, and I'm the coordinator for field experiences.
I'm Paula Salvio, Professor of Education at UNH and the Chair of the Department of Education.
I'm Chelsea Huggins. I teach middle school math at Fenchurch Middle School in Nashua, and I also sit on the advisory board for NHTI's education program.
I'm Dr. Ball. I'm a math specialist for House Brookline Co-op.
And again, I'm Nick Marks. I'm the co-chair of this site visit. I'm also the Dean of the School of Education at Granite State College, board member with the IHE network, and I sit on the CTE as well. So, nice to meet you. So, as the contact list circulates, I figured we can just dive right in. Laura's going to guide us through the PowerPoint. Again, you have a copy of that, a hard copy if you'd like to make any notes. Have any questions along the way, please feel free to bring those questions up at any time. And if you want to just tell me the next slide, I can.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay. So I'm just going to, if you want to just, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to, excellent.
I don't want to give it all away.
Oh my God. So I'm just going to give you a general overview through the PowerPoint. These slides, or more slides actually, a fuller PowerPoint is online at the New Hampshire DOE website. I have truncated some of those slides, so you certainly can look at the full PowerPoint, but when Nick and I were talking, we really wanted to just give you an overview of what the expectations are of the visit, and not get too caught in the weeds philosophically about how we've transitioned the reviews over the past few years. So I wanted to give you the most important information and background about the review.
Hi, Jen, no, good to see you. Handouts are there.
Agenda, so we really just started. And if you don't mind, once you get seated, we'll have you introduce yourself. Okay. Okay, next slide. Jen's been on a visit before, so I will jump into the next slide. So what is program approval? It's a process for assessing and evaluating, but also primarily it is a process of continuous improvement for the institutions of higher education. Our role is to facilitate that conversation about as all of us, is to have this conversation with an institution. This is a peer review, so as Nick and I are the co-chairs, we also have visits coming up. So as institutions, we are reviewing each other's programs as representatives from the council. Excuse me. So whether we come from P12 or higher ed, or even the policy world, we share this common commitment to ensure that our schools are providing the best education for our students. And so our state's prep programs are essential. It's a critical ingredient for outstanding K-12 schools. And they grow this network of beginning educators employed by our schools. So program approval is to confirm that prep programs are utilizing student and program data for continuous improvement, and also ensuring that future educators are highly qualified and well prepared to go into the schools. So please stop me as I go forward if you have any questions. So who's on the team? We have two co-chairs, as Nick mentioned, Nick and I, and we represent the Council for Teacher Education. Typically, we work really closely with the Department of Education liaison. Currently, the liaison is on maternity leave, but she has given her notice and will not be returning. And her supervisor has resigned as well and has left the Department of Education. So I am sure that there will be a representative from the Department of Ed that will need to step in and usher the report through the process. So I'm going to jump far ahead, and once the report is written, that report goes to the Department of Education designated liaison. So that will be someone who will be in interim. And then that will go back to the institution for errors of fact, and then it comes to the Council for Teacher Ed. We make a recommendation based on the recommendation of the team, and then that report then goes to the state board with that recommendation. The state board may accept the recommendation, they may change the recommendation, but the institution and the co-chairs are at that meeting as well, so we can advocate on behalf of the team. So, and then the other really important component, obviously, of the team are the program reviewers. There is one or two reviewers. There is one reviewer reviewing one or more programs. So I'm going to stop there, and we've had a couple of people come in, so I will ask if you would introduce yourself, Jen.
My name is Jennifer Amakato. I am from New Hampshire School Administrators at this time. I'm Director of the Special Ed Support Center there. In my prior life, I can proudly say I was an educator for as many years. I did the math, and I did want to admit the number of years as an elementary and high school special education teacher primarily, but and then went on to be building level administrator at the elementary level and district level, and for special ed director and student services director. That was my life prior, but in the meantime, it's great to be here, and I apologize. There was a car accident, fortunately it wasn't my car. So, but I wanted to, it was right there, so I had to kind of wait around a so I apologize for my arrival. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Stroud, Riviera University, early childhood since 1986, and I currently serve for an IHE network representing RIV, and we just recently went through it ourselves, so I look forward to supporting the next group going through it.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Welcome. I'm Laura Wasilewski and Nick Marks, co-chairs of the presentation. And there's handouts, Lisa, if you want to grab them.
I think there's already a typo. Thank you.
Perfect, okay, great. Okay, so this is our review team. There are a couple people that are not here today that we're videotaping for, and also Nick and or I will meet with them as well. So roles and responsibility. Ultimately, the reviewer and the review team will need to make determinations on the effectiveness levels of an institution in terms of preparing educators. The reviewers, through a review of evidence, will ensure systems are operationalizing in individual programs and ensuring candidates meet standards. So we'll do that through an evidence review, and we'll talk more about what evidence looks like, but that will be through the online review of the materials that Liz and Tom will go over, but also through when we're on campus. If there are remaining questions or you need verification, we will be meeting with students and alumni and a number of other people through interviews and conversations. Our role, Nick and I, will guide and support all of you. So if you have questions as we are moving forward, please don't hesitate to email, and I'll ask that you email both of us. One of us might respond, but we want to make sure that communication is clear, so email both of us. And then on site, we will be having team meetings where we will raise any questions and have an opportunity to support you as well. We'll serve as the primary point of communication between UNH, and I've been designated, and Nick and I are talking frequently, but I've been designated as the person to communicate with Liz. So she represents her university, and I've been representing the team. So if you have a question for the institution, please again email the both of us, and I will contact Liz. We will get from Liz, I haven't looked at the evidence yet, but we will get from Liz recent reports and information, and so we will communicate, we will have that information as well. UNH has gone through a CAPE review, which is the Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation. It's a national review. And so there, you have approval at the institutional level, right? So we will be looking at the 609s and 610s, but you have approval at the institutional level. So if we go into another institution without national review, those reviewers or the co-chairs are looking more at institutional level, but they have approval at the institutional level. So the process, what does it look like from beginning to end? So we're here at the training. Once we leave the training and you have access to the electronic documentation from UNH, then we'll start the electronic review. Each of you in your content areas that you've been assigned, so the 612s and or 614s. And then you start your writing your report. At the end of the PowerPoint, I'll go through and I'll show you, actually I'll do that after UNH. I'll show you the template for the report so that when you arrive on site to the institution, you are verifying, you have a list of questions that you might have that weren't answered on the, so you've drafted your report, and you're creating a list of questions and things to verify on site. So things that might be missing, or you might have a question, and then when we arrive on site, if I have any questions from all of you, I'll talk with Liz about those and get your questions answered on site through the interview process, or on-site process. And then we, again, will have team meetings, and then we'll finalize your sections of the report at the visit, and that just moves the report along. And then one of the things that Nick and I will do is make sure there's a common voice throughout the report. So there might be some edits, but not in content, but in terms of voice. And then we will go through that reporting process, as I mentioned earlier. Any questions so far? How many of you, this is your first visit? Okay, okay. All right, so what makes a great reviewer? Why you are here, why you, is, and what we seek and what we expect. So really what we're looking for is someone who is coming on board to the team with an open mind, thinking flexibly, not coming in with any preconceived ideas about what to expect from the site review, but looking at an open mind with the evidence that you're looking at. We are, as I mentioned before, looking for a conversation about continuous improvement, not necessarily the perspective of, oh, this is how we do it at our institution, this is what they should be expecting, this is what we should be expecting at their institution. Every institution, we have 13 institutions in the state that prepare educators. Each institution prepares teachers in a different way. And so we have to respect that uniqueness. Each institution has the right to prepare teachers in their own way. We have to ensure that they're meeting the standards, but how they do it is up to the institution. So we're looking to have some open conversations, and so that's why the communication skills are most important, to have strong oral and written communication skills. And active listening skills. So when we are listening to the institution talk and present about their approach, we really want to pay attention to how they're implementing the state standards. Okay. And most importantly, you're here reviewing those content areas because of your expertise in that particular area. Paula, do you have your hand up? Are you? No. Okay. I just didn't want to miss a question if you had one. Okay. So the standards that will be evaluated, I hesitated the word evaluated, but we're assessing the implementation. So this is where the high leverage standards sit. The 604s and the 606 are the program approval standards, learning facilitation, how they are instructing their students. And then the 612s and 614s are the content standards. 612s are undergraduate and 614s are the graduate standards. And so that's really where your focus is. You will have an assessment worksheet for those particular standards. So we're really focusing about the certification standards in the discipline and content, but also clinical practice and the assessment systems, both the candidate assessment and the program assessment. So grain size. So when if you have looked at these standards, and I'm sure all of you have, and the math standards, I think there's 106, or something ridiculous like that. So, some are so minute and some are the big picture. And so we really want to consider what are the high leverage practices here? What is the big picture? It's about landing on the right grain size. So which ones are the most high leverage? Tell us about about candidate outcomes and impact. So those are the standards we really want to focus on. We'll want your feedback throughout and at the close of this process in terms of the standards and this idea of continuous improvement. The process, what I cut out on this PowerPoint is that sort of philosophical stance and where we have changed the standards over time. But this is much more about a collaborative process with the institution and a conversation about continuous practice, and not about, you haven't met this particular obscure standard on page 65. Okay. So the goals of the approval team. This is why we're here. We want to assess how effectively the IHE uses reliable and valid measures to ensure that their candidates are ready for certification and to enter the P12 field. Reflect on how the IHE demonstrates this commitment to continuous improvement. Sometimes an institution will implement an assessment tool and the assessment tool doesn't work, and they talk about this isn't working, but this is our plan. This is what we're doing instead, or our idea for moving forward. That is more important than whether or not the tool worked. So we really want to have those open conversations. And develop evidence-based recommendations and decisions. So we, again, want to go back and take a look at the evidence and make our recommendations based on the evidence. Not our opinions, but make our recommendations and decisions based on our conversations and the evidence that we have. Provide IEP with timely, thoughtful, and relevant feedback on how to grow. When we get to the reporting, we'll talk about the difference between recommendations and suggestions. But we want to give the institution our recommendation, and again, we want to move this along in a timely manner. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to put off talking about the self-assessment worksheets until after UNH orients us to their documentation and their evidence. But I do just want to mention the difference between an output and an input. An input, and I may be telling you something you already know, but an input is something like a syllabus or reading list, and an output is something that the student has produced, a work sample. So we will be looking at both inputs and outputs, but looking for evidence to determine how the student demonstrates they've met that standard, or how the institution, what evidence they have to demonstrate they are preparing their educators. So we'll, again, be looking at both inputs and outputs. But again, we're looking at the big picture and not aligning one piece of evidence to one standard, but looking at the bigger picture. Okay. All right. So I will stop there. Does anyone have any questions about sort of the overview or what our purpose is?
Just one
Yeah.
comment. I'm wondering if just for everybody at the table, if you could review the recommendation that the report comes up with as far as the approval. Is it full approval, conditional approval? Just so that we know kind of what the expectation is.
Okay. Sure. We could look at,
And maybe that comes in later when you talk about the
That
report?
goes in later, but
Okay.
let's go ahead and just talk about that. So ultimately, we'll talk about the report after Liz goes through and shares, orients us to her site and the evidence. But in the end, the review team will make a recommendation for full approval of a program, or conditional approval of a program, or non-approval of a program. We can recommend 2 years, 3 years, now up to 7 years, I think, for approval. We can also make a recommendation for a progress report or information be included in an annual report. Every institution has an annual report we do every year, and a progress report is if there is a condition or a concern, we may ask that the progress report address that particular concern. But the recommendation can be for each, the recommendation will be for each individual program. And then again, those recommendations go to the council. When we meet at the council, the institution is present, and there will be reactors from the council, or responders, keep changing that name. The council, there will be 2 people identified to read the report who have not participated in the visit. And then, so the chairs will make some opening remarks, the institution will make some remarks, and then the responders will ask the institution questions based on their objective review of the report. And then it opens up to the council, and the council will have ask any remaining questions or make comments, and then the council votes on the recommendation. Does that help, Liz?
Yes,
Sure.
thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes, Paula?
I have a question as well, so I appreciate that question, Liz, because when what we've been talking about in the department is the way in which this particular review potentially impacts the resources we may or may not receive from the institution at large, being UNH, which is part of the system itself, the UNH system. And so I'm wondering, is there, and you may be approaching this in the presentation, but is there a particular area that you'll be looking at with respect to resources and recommendations being made to the larger institutions? So it isn't just feedback for the department per se, but that this feedback is generated to the larger institution.
Yes, so we look at the curriculum, we look at instruction, we look at the content areas, and we look at resources. And so we'll often say to an institution, and when we're on site, we will do this as well, but how can we help you? And that's part of it as well. So if there are things that you want us to look at in particular, we will do that as well.
That's
Because we want this to be a conversation about continuous improvement, and
which requires resources.
right. Yes, and so after Liz talks about UNH in particular and the evidence that you have, I thought that I would go over the worksheet and the report writing for the reviewers, and we have those 2 documents. But I thought it might be more meaningful to do that after Liz talks about UNH in particular and orient us to your site. Does that work?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. So I'll begin by echoing Nick and Laura and thanking everyone for being here. This is so important, such important work, and I appreciate all of your time in delving into this. So thank you. I will need to use your plug to project. And while I'm doing that, I also want to just take care of some housekeeping things. I think that you've received directions to UNH, information about accommodations and the meals and things like that. and also the web link to our exhibit room with the very important password of show report to enter it. So that is the department, and then we've broken it down to an orientation to each program that you'll be reviewing. In addition to those areas, we'll have a candidate assessment area and a program assessment area. So let's take a look at just a couple of things. To begin the review, we'll be looking at the New Hampshire Department of Ed materials. So there's the 2010 team report. That was the last report that the DOE and CTE put together at the last program approval. At that time, we had two programs that needed progress reports. So you'll see those progress reports, and you'll also see the documents that approved those programs. You'll also see any type of change that has occurred since 2010 that required a CTE review. So we have a new program, Elementary Math Specialist, you'll be able to take a look at that, and a substantive change with our health program. So anything of substance that has changed from 2010 to now, that items that weren't included in annual reports, you'll be able to view those to get a historical perspective of where we are. You'll then go into the actual self-assessment report, and that's that larger report that I discussed that gives the very general overview of the institution, the department, the candidate, and program assessment. In this area, you'll see any research and publications that we have discussed in our report that may describe the type of curriculum that we use, or any type of research that we have made note to as far as our assessment processes. You'll see the summary of assessments, any data-driven decisions that we have made based on data that we've gathered that we have used to improve our programs. And those are done in table format. We'll just take a peek at the summary of assessment. So these candidate assessment items are put in table format here. You'll actually see the narrative in the self-assessment report, and even a deeper narrative per program in the program summaries. So that's just kind of an overview of what type of assessments we use, why we collect that type of assessment, what the criteria for success is, and then when and how do we collect it. So you'll see that in the narrative and then also in supplemental tables as you go through. Woo! Well, that's not good. It's easy to get back to. Okay.
Would you mind, Liz, clicking on UNH self-assessment report?
Sure.
And the self-assessment final. It won't open. Okay.
Nope, it will.
I was just wondering if that would be helpful for the reviewers to see that big picture.
Sure. So, let's just take a peek at our table of contents.
That would be great.
Okay, great. So, the self-assessment report will include the orientation to UNH and the education department, and the orientation to the professional educator preparation programs. UNH is fortunate to have both graduate level preparation programs and undergraduate level preparation programs. Those two areas fall under a complete unit, which is our professional educator preparation program. We will also discuss the curricula frameworks, and again, that will be in more detail in each program summary. We'll talk about our clinical partnership and practice and what those frameworks look like. We'll also talk about our quality control system, which includes both our candidate and program assessment. And then we have a section on report findings, of course, what we found through this self-assessment. And it's very interesting, right? As we all know, when we do something, when we look inside and we really are digging deep, we find some things that were really informative. So that's how we've set up the report.
So this would be my recommendation to reviewers for the first place to go, is to read the self-assessment and then go to your content area. Yeah, great, thank you.
Sure. Let's see. As you're going to be reading the report, we'll be making statements about our candidate assessment. And so when you get to the candidate assessment report, you're also going to see, some of the data. So when I talked about how we're doing these little kinks to get you there, to get you to use this site more easily, this is what I mean. Okay, so when if you're reading the report and we're talking about, let's say we're talking about GPA, and you're interested in finding out some specifics about our GPA, we can go into candidate assessment. And you're going to see all of the measures that we use at this time for candidate assessment. So you'll see the UNH praxis scores. You'll see, let's just click on the GPA for baccalaureate programs. You'll be able to see, what we do is we take a look at the mean. So we're looking at the GPA mean in their major, before student teaching, and at graduation. So as you're reading the report, we're going to make reference to this type of data. And so you can go back to the candidate assessment link and see all of the data that we're referring to within the report. Again, you'll see that same type of data in the program summary for each program. I'm obviously not going to go through all of this data, but this is where you would find candidate assessment data. We have several course-based assessments, and those key assessments we have uploaded to our task stream data management system. And so when Laura discussed looking at inputs, you'll be able to see the syllabi, and you'll also be able to see the student outputs, because you'll be able to go right into the report. You'll be able to see the student work, and you'll also be able to see how that student work was assessed. So it gives you a more holistic idea of the assessment and how the student performed and the feedback that the faculty member provided. We have something similar with our program assessment. Our assessment system is made up of two areas, candidate assessment and program assessment. Within that program assessment, you'll see many of our surveys that we do to our graduates and also our P12 leaders, so our cooperating teachers and our principals. So you, again, will be making reference to this in the self-assessment report with findings over several years, what kind of trends we see, and you'll be able to find out more about that information by drilling down into the actual reports. So we have cooperating teacher and intern surveys. We have graduate and principal surveys. We also have follow-up interviews that we do with our graduates and our principals, so those are very open-ended questions. You'll be able to take a look at those. As part of our program assessment, we also do a quality control audit, and that's done every 2 years. And basically, we're looking at if we're following our own policies and procedures. That's a huge part of our program assessment, and we've included the past 2 audits for you to take a look at those as well. And then, of course, our student course evaluations. So you've looked at the self-assessment report. You can see where the candidate and the program assessment data lie. And then you can actually go down to each program summary. So if you are reviewing the early childhood education program, you can click on that program. You'll see the standards. You'll see the plan of study, the syllabi, the faculty CV, the program summary, which is that narrative that talks about candidate assessment, program assessment at that program level. You'll also see this self-assessment worksheet. That worksheet is not going to be available to you until you are on site, and that's just something that CTE and DOE have decided that it's best to take a look at that on site. So you will click on that, it'll be empty. So don't be alarmed. when you get on site, we will provide that for you electronically and in hard copy format.
Liz, that's the self-assessment, that is your UNH's assessment of that particular program?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, the worksheet, I think we used to call it the matrix.
Yes, yes, okay, okay. So what I was asking folks to do was to try and determine using the worksheets, the effectiveness, trying to do the electronic review before they arrive on site. Is that,
Okay.
Are they able to do that?
So you would like those worksheets to be uploaded, completed here?
Well, I was thinking if we did it that way, or is there enough information for the review, for them to do the electronic review before we got on site, so that then they could just have a list of questions and verify while they were on site? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
Or then they need to do, then there isn't an opportunity to do an electronic review, that it would really be, they would be doing their work on site rather than doing some work prior to the site visit.
I think having both context is great. So
Okay.
I can certainly upload those self-assessment worksheets.
That would be great. And then the reviewers could do their electronic review before we get on site. And so the on-site visit is really much more, and they can draft the reports.
Okay.
And then when we get on site, then they can change the reports once information is verified, if they can have all their questions answered, and then we can draft, finalize the report on site.